And so here, this is what we're trying to take all of those bits and pieces of information that we have in different places and put them into a nice, concise package, right? So that we can look at. And so key to that is this process. The process is hugely important when it comes to systematic reviews, with the caveat that your process might look a little bit different based on your discipline and the expectation that there are for your discipline. But generally, this is the process that we're looking at. Most of my conversations with people about systematic reviews are really, really focusing on the importance of this preparation piece. And that's also why we're doing this intro workshop where we're doing a lot of this foundational work, because I feel like you can't overstate the importance of the preparation. You're gathering a lot of information here, so you're doing your exploratory searching and finding, the background information. You're finding existing reviews on the topic, which Hannah will talk about more later in this workshop. You're identifying highly relevant studies. And so you're doing this to sort of set the groundwork. And it's really important to do this both before you start screening any studies, but even before you get to this protocol piece. And the protocol piece is something where, again, there are different expectations for different disciplines, but I highly recommend thinking through this protocol process, even if for your discipline or for the journal that you're publishing in, it's not a requirement. It's super, super helpful, especially when you have a team of people working on a systematic review, which best practice is to have a team of people. I know a lot of people, do them, have just one person working on them. And for certain disciplines, that's the norm, that's, acceptable. For other disciplines, you really need to have a team of 3 or more people working on a systematic review. And so these protocols help, organize that process, help keep your team organized, but also really help with that both reproducibility and transparency piece. And so for Cochrane standards, which is sort of the gold standard for systematic reviews currently is the Cochrane guidelines. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but they really want you to register a protocol in advance before you start screening any of those studies. You'll have identified all of these things that you're going to do, really thought through the process. And so it's that transparency piece of this is what we're going to do. It also helps because it will let other people know that you are working on this systematic review, that it's in process. And we're going to have the last workshop in this series is going to really dig into that protocol. And so the reason we sort of have it at the end rather than up here up front is that all of these things, all of these, steps in the process, you'll really need to think through those before you register that protocol. And so that's sort of why we're doing this organized this way. But, the pieces in this: formulate your research question, identify key terms in databases, determine your eligibility criteria, determine author roles, again, if you have a team, and then identify a framework. And Janelle's going to talk more about that framework piece in a little bit. And then finally, after you set all of that groundwork, then you get into your actual searching. And this doesn't mean that you haven't been doing that exploratory searching from the beginning, but this is where you put that systematic search into place. And then after that, you'll do your supplementary searching as well. Finally, you get to that analyzing, synthesizing, and reporting. And those are all things that we'll talk about more in future workshops as well. So that's just a really brief overview of the process. It's a long process. And so another thing to sort of think through, especially as you're thinking through your protocol, is your timeline. How much time do you have to commit to this? And that's going to really impact how you're approaching this. And even if a systematic review is the best methodology for you, or if maybe you want to think about doing one of these other types of reviews that we're going to talk about in a second. And I'm not going to focus too much on the guidelines, but I do want to point out the different guidelines that are available to you and some of the disciplines that they're most appropriate for. This chart is also in that systematic reviews guide that I stuck the link to at the beginning. And so you can click on any of these and find out more information. We sent the Prisma out as a reading for this workshop. and the Roses guidelines as well for as recommended reading for anybody coming from sort of a STEM discipline. And so you may be familiar with those, but you can go to these links and find out a whole lot more about these guidelines and steps in the process as you're sort of thinking through which guideline might be, most appropriate for what you're working on.